Hello, welcome to the June 2024 Valencia Property podcast. As we said, it's June and summer has started in Valencia. Today was 31 degrees. It's the first time it's got past 30 this summer. So welcome to the Valencia Property podcast, and I've got a fan in the background which you may be able to hear. This month we're looking at the whole host of things: the latest blogs, the latest properties, the timing of the end of the golden visa, the state of the market, and why we might be looking at a huge price boom, beach bars for the summer in and out of the city, and our two areas this month are Cabanyal and Ribarroja. Our Valencia story this month is all about why there are so few car parks in certain parts of Valencia, and believe it or not, it's interesting. So in the last month, we've produced a series of articles on the blog that have been extremely popular, culminating in our two-parter about why we may or may not be on the cusp of a property price boom in Valencia and Spain as a whole. We all know about supply and demand, but are there other aggravating factors, meaning the market is reaching a tipping point one way or the other? Nevertheless, let's start with the first blog of the month, where we asked whether it was possible to make offers and have them accepted, and if so, what sort of discounts could you get? As usual, the link is in the show notes to read it all, but the take-homes are interesting, with the necessity to find an increasingly scarce horseman of the apocalypse if you really want offers accepted. As we said later in the month, bidding wars are happening. We had a client outbid for a property this week when they offered asking price. We had one where the owners refused a full price offer and relisted later in the week at a higher price. We had a client who went above asking price to secure a property, which is usually unheard of here. There's always another interested party now, at least in the city, so we are seeing many properties listed on the portals now at what we euphemistically refer to as optimistic pricing levels, and then they sell too, and they have people competing to buy them. It's madness. The next post was a compilation of recent questions we had on our WhatsApp Q&A, which went slightly wrong, as loads of people got cut off and weren't receiving the messages, because we did so many, I assume. So we published all of the questions and answers on the post. Again, it's in the show notes. And next time we do a Q&A, it'll be on YouTube or Zoom or something like that. Not decided which is the most interactive yet. I don't want to do that Zoom thing where you get, you're on mute and your microphone isn't working and things like that. Our next post was one which, for a change, wasn't written by me. We accepted a guest post because it was relevant to our clients here. How to meet people in Valencia through the Introverts Social Club, run by Tom. Tom wrote an article all about the ways you can get to meet people in Valencia if you are not the most extrovert person in the world. Plenty of ideas in this for those coming here alone to get that social circle that many people miss on first arriving in Valencia. And speaking of guest posts, don't, as mentioned in the blog, I'm just not interested in your CBD, crypto scam, appendage enhancement products, or your travel post about the wonders of Milton Keynes. They aren't relevant, so stop asking me to let you post a relevant post I think which will be of interest to your readers. And even more importantly, stop sending me a reminder by mail that I haven't answered you, a second reminder that you are expecting an answer, and a third reminder that you are still there, and if I'm not interested I should just tell you. Get the message, mate. If you haven't been answered by the fourth time you have spammed me, it's either because you are definitely blocked or in spam, or I'm just not really into you. However, if you have something relevant for our clients, then let me know. Next, we came to the market situation in May 2024. What's happening, what's going to happen, what may happen, what we think should happen, and a whole lot more. To cut a long story short, as Spandau Ballet said, there is a lot to take in here, but the short story is that the market is buoyant. Demand is huge and there's no current sign of things changing. Does this mean there's going to be a huge spike in prices? Well, for those interested, these are the things we discussed, and you can read them in the show notes in the article. We made some assertions, if you like. We said the market is extremely strong at the moment. Most people expect the market to get stronger as interest rates drop this summer. Supply is limited and getting worse. Demand continues to grow from a national and international level. First-time buyers are having problems finding suitable properties at reasonable prices. Investors are investing more. Government policies are not having the desired effect. Mortgages are getting easier to find. People are moving to the suburbs to find value. Rentals are almost on the point of being impossible to find for foreigners and not great value for residents. It's better to buy than rent. There are not enough new builds. There are definitely not enough affordable options being built. that Giri jails should be made residential to give first-time buyers a chance. Immigration numbers are increasing demand. Bidding wars are happening. Family atomization is happening. And for some, the train has left the station. You can read all about it in the 2 articles. And if you have any questions, then feel free to get back to us with them. Of course, you can find the links in the show notes, or just go to the blog at www.valencia-property.com/new. But just for your delectation here on the pod, what do we mean by the train has left the station? Well, I responded to somebody in an email last week, and unfortunately this response is going to become more common. I was talking with my colleague Gavin this week, and he said that for some people who have he had been working with for a year or so, there's now no chance of finding what they want based on their requirements. They had a chance last year at the price they wanted and could afford, with the requirements they had and in the areas they wanted, but now it's simply impossible. The train has now left the station for them, and it's not coming back anytime soon. As I said in the article, there will be a consistent uptrend in prices, and that is going to continue. For those clients, unfortunately, they will not be buying in Valencia unless they do one thing. The only options they now have are to change the criteria, change the location, or change the price they can pay by getting financed through a mortgage. The train still hasn't reached the stations around the city. Local trains are slow, but it will be there soon. If you're looking at property at your price limit and there is one that ticks most of your boxes, then maybe decide to go for it. Now, we don't do precious sales, but seriously, if you see one that thinks suits you, go for it. At the lower price ranges, and that means anything up to 300,000 now in the city, by the way, we can no longer say to you, be patient and something will come up. It almost certainly won't. As prices rise, your wages don't generally rise at the same rate, and your savings most certainly don't. However, you might be lucky and you might be selling a place in an area where prices have already risen a lot, and therefore you have got money to buy here, which may well be cheaper than where you're coming from. Use low interest rates to your advantage, because that is what everyone else is doing, or change the criteria and go for somewhere not as affected by the price changes. It might mean you need to move a bit inland. I live outside the city and have done happily for 25 years. I still consider myself to be living in Valencia, but with the best of both worlds, a great city on my doorstep in 15 minutes, and a quieter place to live with more space for my money than when I bought. And why didn't I buy elsewhere closer to the city? Well, what I wanted didn't exist in my price range, so no change there then. It's still happening. On the property front, we took on a new VA a couple of weeks ago, and as a result, we're seeing a lot more properties coming onto the site and to visit. This benefits our clients, of course, giving you a greater choice, as we know how we need to approach each seller and how to push their buttons correctly. We've also been interviewing for somebody else to join our team, taking you out, and more on that as soon as we have made some progress. Lastly, in market news, the Golden Visa. We put an update a couple of weeks ago that the Golden Visa has now been presented for law in the Parliament. It was on the 24th of May, so we expect it to go through around September. So we really are on the last chance saloon now for the Golden Visa. If you buy this month, like June we're in now, you might be lucky and be able to get it in time. You might not, so we're not saying to anyone, yes, we can guarantee it. We've put in our blog about the Golden Visa, the whole proposed law change. You can read it there if you read Spanish. It's essentially the same law as before for other methods of being granted the Golden Visa, but the investment in property part has been taken out. So, summer is coming and it's time for Spain's favourite pastime, having a drink at the beach bar, otherwise known as the Chiringuito. Now, the beach bars in Valencia are a relatively recent phenomenon, having really become popular in the last 20 years, and especially after the financial crisis of 2008. Prior to this, Valencians tended to ignore their own beaches, preferring to holiday elsewhere. Now the beach has become a part of the city itself, and along with that have come beach bars, chiringuitos, beach activities, and a whole new crowd enjoying these facilities. The best beach bars, in my opinion, can be found on the Patacona beach in Alboraya. But remember that the Patacona is just an extension of the Malvarosa and Las Arenas beaches going north from the marina and port towards Port Supplier. There are some very decent beach bars on the Patacona, starting with the extension of La Mas Bonita bar and going all the way to the doggy part of the beach. That's not dogging, by the way. It's once you get past the end of what you consider the beach, there's a little river that comes out, and on the other side of that, there's a part where you can take your dogs. Anyway, there's one there called the 3.14, but you can't eat pie there, unfortunately. And that's a bad dad joke alert. Be sure to look out for Patasur, El Ocho, and, well, the others. They're all pretty similar, but with different music choices. I believe they'll even take requests to turn off the fecking reggaeton, if you ask nicely. As we mentioned last month, we're going to talk about an area of Valencia City and an area outside each month. And this month it's the turn of the Cabanyal in the city, by the beach, and Ribarroja inland, next to last month's entrant, Leliana. So the Cabanyal is the first area people think of when looking towards Valencia Beach. It lies just to the north of the marina and is full of old fishermen's houses and a combination of decay and renewal. The Cabanyal manages to keep its attraction despite all of the new modernisations going on because the majority of the buildings have protected facades and restrictions on what can be developed in the gaps between buildings in the worst part. The bit where Blasco Ibañez Avenue was going to be extended down to the sea, which will no longer be happening. A recipient of plenty of EU money for its rehab, the Cabanyal gets better and more popular with people over the years as the beach gets ever more used by Valencians who realise what they have on their doorstep. The extension of the pavements in Calle Barraca has allowed an explosion of new cafes and shops to complement the already existing Calle de la Reina offer, and the number of events happening at the marina on a regular basis, along with its attractions, mean there are always plenty of people milling about in the Cabanyal. It's still a bit gritty and earthy in places, and be careful of ground floor apartments here due to damp issues sometimes. But the Cabanyal has that city living feel while being right by the beach. Named by The Guardian as one of the hippest neighbourhoods in Europe, and often cited in the international press as Valencia's new bohemian chic area, the Cabanyal still leaves people with the old Marmite feeling. You either love it or you hate it. If you go on Facebook though, you'll still find people asking the question, is it dangerous? Because I read something somewhere from an unnamed source that says it is. Wrong, to quote the orange shit gibbon. Let's just say that a lot of the writers on travel blogs have never actually visited the area and spend half their lives getting their email ignored by me and others who actually live and work here and will not allow them to do a guest post about something they haven't got a clue about. Outside the city this month, we're going to talk about Ribarroja. Now, Ribarroja, and you've got to roll those R's, and I'm not doing it great, but hey, Ribarroja lies just 20 minutes from Valencia and is a residential area with a fantastic park as its heart. It's split into two by the River Turia and the park that surrounds it, where you can cycle all the way down into Valencia without ever meeting a car, or up to Villamarchant a bit further inland. The town itself is served by the metro from Valencia after an extension to the line was completed a few years ago, and it's just a few stops from the airport on the way too. There is a regular bus service into the city, and on the other side of the river and connected tightly to Leliana, there's an area of large, rambling villas perched on the hillside overlooking the Turia Valley. And this is why Ribarroja and Leliana are often confused, because basically they're the same place in this area. Property in Ribarroja is a mixture of these elegant and expensive villas, apartments and old townhouses in the town itself. And they've also got new developments on the edge of town which are a combination of semi-detached and terraced houses with common areas. The population of Ribarroja is 23,500, having risen from 13,000 in the last 25 years, showing its popularity just like the rest of the Turia Valley area. My town of La Pobla has gone from 11,000 to 26,000, for example. Ribarroja has excellent facilities with shops, cafes and bars, of course, but also supermarkets, an excellent sports centre and a football ground, and plenty of activities held for the residents by the town hall. It's even got a good weekly market too. So if you're interested in Ribarroja, let us know and we'll suggest some houses there. It's a good place to be, and also the taxes tend to be half of those in Leliana, and there's a long story behind that too, but I'm not going to bore you with that on this podcast. If you want to know more about it, ask me. And finally this month, car parks. Now, you might want to finish the podcast here and not listen to any more, but I'm going to tell you now. A rather dry subject with a rather interesting background, so you might as well listen. It's going to be 3 or 4 minutes. Valencia is a flat city, of course, and it's also a very historic city, and there are the reasons why there are so few car parks in certain areas. I was always told by the developers of new apartment blocks in the city that there would be 20 apartments and no car park. It always struck me as a bit strange, even though Valencia is a very walkable and compact place. And then I found out why. And the truth is, it depends on the area. Centrally, the main city of Valencia, the medieval city, grew up in the bend of the River Turia as it wound its way down to the Mediterranean. And every now and again, the River Turia had a little flood. Now, of course, we all know about why Valencia now has the longest park in Spain. We've talked about it in previous podcasts. It used to be this river until the big flood of 1957, and this flood is ingrained in the heads of Valencians, as it is still living memory of the older generations. However, the potential for flooding might be in the back of the minds of Valencians, but that's not the real reason there are so few car parks. Prior to 1957, there were so few cars in and around Valencia that car parks weren't a priority, so we got lucky. They would have been flooded. But the real reason that there are so few car parks in the centre is the Moorish and Romanic heritage of the city. Dig down, you find Roman remains, you find Moorish remains, and you find more remains. And if you find significant remains in the city, you are obliged to report them to the authorities, who would immediately put a stop to any work going on whilst the remains were investigated. And that means at least a 2-year stop in your building process, and usually more. To avoid this possibility, developers would avoid digging down any further than the foundations of the building in most central areas, meaning there was little or no space to add parking places. Equally, the roads in the Old Town are narrow, as originally they were a warren of access routes to each plaza in the city, and only required access by horse and cart in medieval times. Try taking your big 4x4 SUV down these roads and then manoeuvring it into a garage, and you can see the problem. So even when a building was demolished and replaced, there still really wasn't the space for a car park that could be very useful. This is not the case in other areas of the city though. Let's take our featured area this month, the Cabanyal. Now, as mentioned before, ground floor apartments at the Cabanyal can get a bit damp, as it's essentially built on a sandy rock, and capillary action means damp can seep into a building at ground level. The deeper you go, the worse this can get. And also, when it rains in Valencia, it really pours. So underground car parks are at particular risk when you are right by the sea, as the water will find its way into the car parks as the drains are not deep underground like in many cities. They're just a few feet under the roads. And with a tropical downpour, they can be overwhelmed unless they have a cordon sanitaire, and this increased the building costs by far in the past. Similarly to the centre though, back in the day there was no need to have many car parks, as there weren't many cars. Spain was considered a third world country due to the Civil War and then Francoism until it started opening up to the world in the late 60s with the Spain is different theme. And there'll be more about that in our next podcast on the history of tourism in Spain. The less historic areas of the city were thrown up in the 50s and 60s, and again car parks were not a priority. The most historic areas were thrown up in the 19th century, and cars were but a glint in the eye and a potential future problem for the local horse population, which is why you have wide enough doors for the entrance into a patio for a horse and cart, but it's not big enough of an entrance for a car. The only places where car parking places are abundant is in the areas built during the building boom in the early 2000s, such as Nou Campanar and Nou Benigalap, as the buildings were designed with the idea that most residents wanted and had a car, and therefore needed a car parking space. So there you go. Valencia is a walkable, cyclable, scooterable city, but it might not be the ideal place for your Ford Lightning F-150 pickup. And that's it for the Valencia Property Podcast this month. If you'd like to contact us with questions or to make a point about anything we've talked about this month, either in the podcast or on the blog, then feel free to contact us at information@valencia-property.com or contact us via WhatsApp on 657 994311. Until next month, goodbye, and we hope you enjoyed it. When are you coming to join us in Valencia? And just don't bring your huge car.